Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Crypto Check-In, recorded on December the 11th, 2024. I'm your host, Robert Swartha, and joined by my co-host, Andres Sandate. How's it going, Andres?
Hey, Robert. It's good. Good to connect this sunny, breezy Wednesday in Atlanta. There's some interesting headlines to cover, and there's been quite a bit of price action in crypto over the last, few days.
Yes.
Probably because of some of the things that we'll talk about today. So it's good to reconnect, though.
Yeah, you're right. It's breezy. I was outside. We had 1.5 inches of rain the last couple of days, and all that moisture's outside getting blown through you with the super fast wind. So it's super chilly, even though the number doesn't reflect it. So anyways, we'll jump in here. We got a lot of topics today because the text is really small. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it's obviously a lot to go through. But the first one being Trump finally selected his nomination for SEC chair. I was surprised. Obviously I have a bit of vested interest in the sense I was waiting for this one over some of the other appointments, but finally selected Paul Atkins. Appears to be very well respected, and he has been at the SEC before, so you kind of understand at least what you're going to get from most of the work he's going to do. Crypto was not something that they dealt with when he was there, but crypto as an industry seems excited about it. So.
Yeah, that's my takeaway as well. There's a lot of different ways to look at this particular appointment for crypto and the future coming out of the environment we've been in crypto, where it's been more of an approach of regulation through enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem over the last month, 6 weeks, that there's been a lot more enthusiasm, if you call it that, from the crypto community and the industry about more of a regulatory framework and an approach. There was a couple of notable speeches that have been made around crypto. One by the president's son, Eric Trump, I saw was over in Abu Dhabi, I believe it was, at a big crypto summit, global summit, and this week made comments that this would be the most pro crypto administration. There's only been a few crypto administrations in general, but this one certainly probably will, at least from all indications, will probably be much more pro crypto than the Biden administration. So you put that together with this appointment and some of the other things that we'll cover today, I think that there's cause for optimism.
Yeah. I was mentioning to a friend the other day via text that it just feels weird having what appears to be wind at our back instead of a strong headwind. We dealt with that for 4+ years. Now it feels eerie. You almost feel like, where's the shoe going to drop? Because it feels too good. I'm sure something will not go our way along the way. And potentially this next thing we're going to talk about may be part of that, but it's fun to at least not have to be battling as hard to kind of take a step forward each day. So
I look at that and listen to your comment, and to me that's a sign of being a more astute investor. You're thinking about the risks, right? You're thinking about the things you're not able to maybe put a price or target around, or you're not able to underwrite, and that's the unknown, right? And that's your job as an investor, is to think about the potential risk factors. So it's easy to get caught up if you're a crypto bull in an environment like this, where it seems like daily there's a lot of positive news coming out. But I think cooler heads will often prevail in the sense around taking each piece of information, each news, and looking at it collectively. So let's see if Paul Atkins does accept the role. I know that there's some speculation that he's feeling, or at least there was sources that suggested that he might be feeling a little overwhelmed by the role. There certainly is going to be a lot of spotlight on him and or whoever is the SEC chair. So hopefully that individual's up to the task.
It's last little bit of on him is, people have said a lot about him in the past about how he's acted and how they feel like he's right for this role. The way that I heard one person sum it up was he is the anti-Gensler for the SEC, because we need to get rid of the stench of what has happened there. There are a lot of reputational issues have gone on at the SEC, and that admittedly it needs to be a respected agency again. And for in some eyes, it's not. So maybe we can get some, adults in the room to kind of clean it up. So,
Well, we'll see. It'll be an update that we continue to
yeah,
track over the next few months. Yeah.
absolutely. Our second topic, kind of staying with the SEC, is Chairwoman Crenshaw is up for reappointment. So her term is ending. She has said that she was willing to sit for 5 more years in the seat. And admittedly, this feels like it's a rush job. Obviously, the country voted. We know which direction it's going, and you have Democrats that are still in control in the banking committee, which does the appointments for this. Literally appointed 2 new senators, both Democrats from different states, ahead of their normal. They got sworn in, so they got sworn in early, so they could vote on this. The vote was supposed to be this morning. It got pushed this afternoon. It sounds like it's not going to be in the normal room. It's going to be in a secondary room. It feels slimy, in my opinion, and I hope that she does not get the confirmation she needs and has to. And Trump will get his chance to kind of put someone in that seat, but. She is more anti-crypto than Gensler. She wrote the dissent letter for the Bitcoin ETFs when Gensler voted for them. When the court said you have to do it, she was saying, we don't feel like we should have to do this. So
yeah,
it's unfortunate we are even having this conversation.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. The whole nature of DC, right? It's and politics in general. Like we had this giant election, big election, lots of emotion, right, leading into it, and then you look at it from the multitude of dimensions, right, from the crypto Wall Street perspective. It appears in the economy and just asset prices, stock prices, like the markets cheered the result. Then you go into actual lawmaking and regulation and all the things that can take the shine off of or the enthusiasm out of this late Q4, if you will, continued rally. Everybody's preoccupied with rates. It seems like every time you turn on Bloomberg or CNBC, the discussion is tariff policy, rate policy, but there's all this other stuff like this going on behind the scenes that is also meaningful to the outcome of regulation. It feels a little bit like the Democrats are trying to put a counterweight in last minute to what they probably feel like is a tsunami of change that's about to take place in terms of banking and regulation. Who's to know if it's going to actually take place? But you always sort of scratch your head and you have to question like the motives. But it does feel like the Democrats are trying at least to get some, whether it's anti-crypto or, somebody to sort of be willing to pump the brakes. That's what this feels like. If she is in fact, more anti-crypto than Gensler.
Yeah, it's I saw a tweet which I didn't include in our notes here. Was one of the people that work at Fairshake, the crypto pack that had such influence on the election.
Sure.
And it says, "We are watching closely today."
Yeah.
Because they're gearing up for the midterms and trying to support. One of the 2 people, Adam Schiff, that is one of the guys that got confirmed early, so we could vote in this, was supported by Fairshake. So there's this whole thing like, is he going to be? How is he going to vote here? Because he's in some sense conflicted potentially. He wants to vote along party lines, but like potentially the people that helped get him in office have different desires. So I don't know. We will, I guess, know maybe by the end of the day or maybe tomorrow. But
Fairshake has a huge war chest, as we will as we've talked about on this weekly update, and they were very successful in deploying money to support candidates. 48 ish, I think, won 85+%.
Correct.
So I mean, look, the midterms are around the corner, and I think a lot of people are just exhaling from this last election. and yet, right, we all know that there's a lobby busy at work setting the chessboard. So let's just see what happens. Obviously, the SEC is going to be meaningful in these updates, until we know kind of the direction and approach. And I think we're going to be talking about regulation a lot in 25. I mean, that's just the nature of this industry. Where we're at.
Right. And I hope to be right, because that regulation in the sense that we're talking about what is being proposed and what's being voted on and all that stuff versus the lack thereof.
We'll hopefully see some lawmaking.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. So our next topic is Chair Powell last week, towards the end of the week, had public comments. I forget if he's at a conference or wherever he was at.
He was at the Deal Book Summit, and that
Okay.
was on December 4th. So yeah, they had a lot of luminaries, government officials. Andrew Ross Sorkin, who does the Deal Book
Yeah.
blog every day, New York Times. So yeah, he came out with some comments. What did he have to say?
Yeah. So his quote is and this is a bit paraphrased here, but care about the relationship between crypto and the banking system. So end quote. Like when I first read that, I'm like, oh, it's obvious. They care. They don't want there to be a relationship. Like, it's not that they care about how the relationship is. They actually don't want it to happen. If the last 4 years are any sort of evidence of that. But yeah, it just seemed a little bit like reactionary to what happened in November versus him trying to actually be supportive of
Well,
something.
here's the
He's had the
thing.
opportunity, and he
Yeah,
has
here's the
not. He's
thing.
done the opposite.
Sorry to cut you off. I'll let you finish your point, and then
No, go
I'm
ahead.
gonna give you my take.
Um,
These summits, you get these officials that come on. I have to think that there's 3 or 4 things that they've said. Just I'll talk about. You can ask me
mhm,
about Bitcoin.
right.
One of the things that so in addition to the comments Jerome Powell made, context I think also helps,
Mhm,
right? So up until a week ago, it was unclear if President-elect Trump 2.0 was going to keep Powell and or
right.
push him out. Powell came out and said, "I'm not going to go.
Right.
I'm going to lawyer up." And he's a lawyer, so he's like, I might have to defend myself." So
Yeah.
you saw this sort of standoff in public. It came out, I believe, yesterday or the day before. President-elect
Mhm,
Trump said he's not going to replace. So you have all this on in the background, like these two are talking. He goes into the summit. Andrew Ross Sorkin asks him about Bitcoin, and he said some other things that I thought were noteworthy. One is he compared Bitcoin to gold and said
He's yeah,
it's more of a competitor to gold. It's just virtual or digital.
right.
So for
And not
crypto,
the US dollar. Like, he was trying to
right,
make the
and
difference
not the
there.
dollar, trying to
Yeah.
completely separate them. And he went on to add that it's basically it's too volatile for it to be
Mhm,
a reserve currency, or for it to be looked at like the dollar.
right.
He continued with, I think Andrew Ross Sorkin asked him, "Do you own Bitcoin personally?" And he said, "I'm not allowed to." So I
Mhm,
think that policy, these folks are only allowed to basically own index funds, which would make sense.
right.
You can only short and do more normal trading if you're like an elected official, like in the Senate. You
Yeah,
you can go and like short healthcare stocks when healthcare is
yeah,
about to get hammered with regulation, but you can't do that
yeah.
at the Federal Reserve. Um, so in total, my takeaway from this is yes, I think it's easy to look at the Federal Reserve and Powell, their leaders, saying nothing should change. The
Mhm,
U.S. Dollar should remain the global reserve currency, but there's all sorts of folks that are out there in crypto land and Bitcoin maxis in particular that obviously
mhm.
feel different.
Yeah.
So when asked about should there be a Bitcoin reserve, I think he said basically no. Um,
Mhm. Right.
so I just think these questions are going to keep coming up um, more and more. I think as we go forward, and geopolitically, you just look at the Middle East. You look at Russia. You look at what's going on in, uh, you know, between China and Taiwan. I mean, there's enough hotspots around the world
Mhm.
geopolitically for this narrative to live.
Oh,
Whether
absolutely.
Trump, yeah, whether Trump decides to go and create a reserve or not, like I just think that it's going to continue to come under increased spotlight. Um, you know, they've got a lot on their shoulders around interest rate policy. There's
Mhm.
a lot of folks that think we're in this, higher for longer environment, but the numbers economically don't look bad.
Right.
Unemployment's not terrible. That
Mhm.
doesn't feel good to people out of work or
Sure.
out of jobs. Inflation is down from 7% down below 3 again. So again, to the people in the struggling, maybe it doesn't feel that way, but they haven't done a terrible job, you know, at the
Mhm.
Federal Reserve. So it's just going to be interesting to see how this whole narrative of crypto, strategic reserve, and central banks evolves. Um,
Yep.
He's going to be a
Well,
popular speaker over the
yeah,
next couple of years.
and it will be. He's certainly going to get more of these questions
Oh
over
yeah,
the next coming months and years. Like it's not going to dissipate for sure. So
yeah.
we will see. Moving on, our next topic. I'm often asked, where's crypto being used? People want to know what is it good for besides gambling and speculating. And I go through. I could talk people's ears off about this, but I love it when I see these new things. Be like, I can point to something else, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In this case, Algorand, which is one of the networks, it's a utility token, in my opinion. It fits in the Dino tokens that we talked about last week in that basket. Electricity bills in Afghanistan, 30% of them are being paid with an app that uses the Algorand network. So it's not meant to be like world changing in this sense. That app, I imagine, could be used in a lot of places. It's a country that's rebuilding their infrastructure, admittedly. So they're making a huge technology leap. They'll be ahead of the U.S. I can't imagine we're going to pay any sort of bills, let alone utility bills, even in the next 10 years on a crypto network. That would blow me away. It's going to be a slow mover for sure. But our systems largely work here. But in countries that are getting a choice to kind of reevaluate what they use, it could be an option. So
yeah, when you could start with a clean slate and kind of start without sort of the legacy systems and the infrastructure and obviously the millions and millions of customers, it's at all the dynamics, right? I heard somebody that owns an electric company say that like our power grid's 100 years old in certain parts of the country, and so we've been talking about infrastructure and updating the grid and rolling blackouts, and if you live in California, you're aware of that. But yeah, I like these updates because while they're small in the global impact, they're meaningful in the sense of they're a test case for what we could be seeing. And it's like I said, it's more evidence of commercial utility.
Absolutely. Cool. So next topic is we're going to jump back into Bitcoin and Bitcoin ETF land here for a couple of these topics. So IBIT, which is the biggest ETF, everyone should know that at this point for Bitcoin from BlackRock, it is now over 50 billion of AUM. And again, everyone's expectation was the whole asset class, so all 8 or 9 of them might break 30 to 50 by the end of the year when they launched in
30 to 50 billion.
Yeah, billion.
Total.
So
yeah,
it's only a couple of weeks left in the year here at this point, but it's pretty amazing what these guys they've done in effectively 11 months. So
yeah, I mean in under 300 days or so, or
228 days. I'm guessing those are market days,
trading days. Yeah. So in under 228 trading days, or in 228 days relative to the second fastest, it took 5 or 6 times that. So
yeah,
just a sense for just the demand out there for this asset class. As you've said for some time, Robert, like there hasn't been a new asset class really in decades.
well,
think about it.
No, centuries. I mean, it's over a century. It was bonds was the last one. Yeah.
Right. So yeah. There's certainly demand for it. We I know we're going to talk about more about ETFs, in the weeks and months ahead because there's filings and there's updates. But yeah, I just think it's easy to overlook and say, oh, we were talking 10 billion like 3 or 4 months ago, and then we were talking 25, and now we're talking 50. It's remarkable, really, when you think about it. And I don't know if even some of these big wirehouses and big institutions, where there's potentially a lot of pent-up retail demand. I don't even know if they're even allowed to sell the ETF yet. So
right. There's a good amount. I don't know if it's half, but there's a good percentage of basically investor accounts out there that don't have access to them. And or even if they do, maybe their advisor's not advising on it yet. So it's like this is going to be a multi-year probably rollout, but it'll be fun to watch if nothing else. So
yeah, I'm thinking that wholesaler grid for the ETF sales for these wholesalers out, that hawk the funds to advisors and others. I'm thinking the payout grid on the ETF is probably been reduced a couple of times given the amount of demand. Because I think these wholesalers out there for BlackRock are probably like, I mean, gosh, I can only imagine that role this year. Probably a lot of people that want to see them. So I love the word czar, by the way, whenever I see that in terms of like these
Yeah.
regulatory or sort of political appointments. It just harkens back to like a different era. Tell
Yes.
me, tell me when you see this headline, David Sachs. We talked about him before the show started. He's a VC. He's a crypto pioneer,
Yep.
a PayPal Mafia member. But tell us about this update, because whenever I see the word czar, I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah. I'll answer that. We're going to talk about Bitcoin 100,000 first, so we can go in order.
Oh man, I thought we were gonna skip that one. That was just
Oh
so
yeah,
obvious.
obvious and unimportant, right?
It is worth. It's a big milestone. I did that
Yeah,
one on
it was
purpose.
a big,
Yeah,
obviously a very big mental milestone. It wasn't
mental
exactly
milestone.
a technical level that Bitcoin had to be terribly worried about. It has bounced around. It is right at 100,000 today as we record, just shy of 101. But it was big. It happened, I believe, around 9:30, 10 p.m. that on the evening it did, and it's I was excited because I had a bet with a friend Casey that it would happen during non market hours, because I just felt like I
Yeah,
had a better chance. He took the market hours and he lost that bet, so he owes me a dinner at this
yeah,
point.
yeah. It's kind of a psychological.
Mhm.
Maybe for some people, like a psychological. I know there was some mainstream press that picked up on this and said, "Oh, all of a sudden it's at 100,000." It doesn't mean anything really in the grand scheme of
Thing,
things.
right?
Perhaps. I mean, I would argue it's just a number, but it is remarkable to think about that pizza bet or that pizza
Correct.
order.
Yes.
you
Yeah,
know,
that
the
a
$10,000.
$100 million pizza at that point, or two pizzas at that point. So
Yeah.
it's fun. So jumping back to your question about czar, there was rumor that Trump was going to appoint, or name somebody to be a crypto czar. He eventually did a crypto and AI czar kind of bundled together. I mean, I think it does make some sense. It's basically a technology role, that he's putting somebody in. And there was all sorts of names floated for this. There was admittedly some names in the crypto space that I was a little concerned that they were going to be appointed, because I felt like they were a little hot-headed,
Mm,
and I didn't feel like that is the voice that needed to be in the White House, talking about crypto in particular. But David Sachs, he's a calm, cool, collected dude. He's on the All In podcast. He's part of the PayPal Mafia, if you want to even go back that far. Well-respected VC that got appointed to be the AI and crypto czar, and everybody's excited. Admittedly, I had to do a little bit more homework on him. I wasn't too up. I don't listen to the podcast with them all that much, so I've done a little bit of homework on him, and I'm impressed. I can't wait to have a bit of voice of reason that knows what they're talking about technology that close to, obviously, the president, but just people with an influence within that in the White House. So
yeah. Um, my guess is the person, and when they get these appointments, they're not relocating to DC. They're just going to be in DC for critical meetings to give critical updates, and then otherwise are keeping a pulse on the industry, or no?
I don't know, because it's also a position that the president can just create. It's not. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
appointed by the Senate, or
yeah,
confirmed by the Senate or anything like that. So my guess is, I mean, there's not much AI and crypto that is happening in DC outside of we just need regulation. So like you would think it's more like be out
sure.
in the field, come back and report. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many tech folks that have been involved in the administration, in the actual vetting of candidates and the selection of candidates, it sounds like, and now, part of the sort of what you call it, maybe inner circle. And I think it's going to be really fun, fascinating, um, to watch now that it seems that things have aligned, right? Like if you're sitting and you're saying, if you could have all of this stuff line up to be pro crypto in terms
Mhm.
of the election results,
Right.
um, you pretty much got a clean sweep, right? So now it's going to be
Yes.
kind of interesting and maybe
Yeah.
fun to watch to see, like, can can this actually translate into some regulation
Mhm.
that gets bigger institutions and banks and other financial institutions engaged? Because
Mhm.
if you can get them engaged, then I think there's, kind of more of a domino effect, right? I just don't think we've really scratched the surface of what the technology and crypto can be,
Mhm.
until we get, that wholesale regulation in place. So it seems like you've got the pieces on the chessboard to do something meaningful over the next 4 years.
Mhm.
Just,
Yeah.
optimistic that with all of these pieces and all these folks, that we'll actually see some results this time.
You're right. And we were hopeful. I've reminded people we were hopeful about crypto regulations in the past, even if they
Yeah.
started working on it day 1 or 2 of the new administration. That was also, when Trump first came into office, a big thing he was working on was taxes. It took him almost 2 years to get it done.
Yeah.
Obviously, taxes is a big hairy beast.
Yeah.
And hopefully crypto is not that and can get done sooner, but things do take a while, even if you
They do.
have what appears to be alignment. So
Right.
fingers crossed, I guess is the way that I'm approaching that. Our next one should be relatively quick here. So there's been some other ETF filings. XRP's had some, Solana's had some, and there's been like maybe one HBAR, I believe, each ETF filing. But there's basically the scoop that I was reading for Eleanor Tourette from Fox Business was saying that 2 of the 5 prospective issuers for the Solana ETFs that the SEC is telling them that they plan to deny their 19B4 filing. So basically part of the application process before the S1.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I'm not terribly surprised. We were talking before the show that like Solana is relatively well known in the crypto space. You ask anyone outside of crypto, they're having no idea what Solana is, what it does.
Right.
And I just think that, at the end of the day, I can't imagine there'd be much demand for this product. Like, who's going to buy this? Much like the ETH one, but even worse, because it's even harder to explain Solana versus Ethereum, I think, to most people. So,
yeah, there's so many products created on Wall Street or by Wall Street. Whether the folks behind this are Wall Street or they're crypto and Wall Street, you can white label an ETF now. There's so many platforms out there where you can create an idea, a theme, create an exposure, come up with an interesting name. Crypto is not the first and won't be the last industry where you see product created or attempt to create product to see if there's actual demand. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see enough demand without an ETF that just because there's an ETF, it all of a sudden changes the game. So
yeah, but with regulation, maybe it becomes clear. I don't know. But we're probably still 6 months away from any sort of some real regulation that we can use to maybe help with the ETF rollouts.
Yeah.
So our next topic, we've talked a little bit about this in the past. So Bitcoin being put on the balance sheet, there was a vote that was going to happen by the Microsoft shareholders about having Microsoft put it on its balance sheet. That vote happened yesterday on Tuesday, I believe, and they voted it down. Admittedly, I'm not surprised. I don't think it has any business being in a business balance sheet outside of if it actually has utility. And granted, I'm a bit of a utility maximalist in that sense, but they voted it down. And literally the same day, the Amazon shareholders are requesting the board consider it to put on their balance sheets. I'm like, are we going to get a different story at Amazon? I guess that provides the dynamic. Also, does Microsoft put it up for revote? I don't know. It's just kind of fascinating to kind of see this play out. And maybe this whole idea of it being on corporate balance sheets is a bit of a not a big rocket. It's just a little bitty ball rocket that goes off, and like there's not much fanfare because not many of them pick it up. So, would be my guess.
Here's the thing. This is one where I'd like to dig in personally and do a little more research. And the reason is, if you look at the top 10 holders of most of the stocks on the S&P 500, most of those holders are big institutional money managers, right? So they're the like of BlackRock and Vanguard and Fidelity, who are ironically also some of the biggest issuers of Bitcoin. So what to me is kind of interesting is when you step back and you look at the corporate governance and you look at organizations like ISS, the Institutional Shareholder Services Group that runs proxies and kind of votes or at least recommends or will weigh in kind of publicly on behalf of shareholders, like what they want the board to do. I just haven't dug in enough on this, but it's but it is interesting that a lot of the big asset managers, particularly in the case of like a BlackRock, a Fidelity, they're in crypto now, and they've got products. So this is going to be something to follow up with. I'm gonna do a little bit more digging and research because I want to come back and see what these corporate treasuries are thinking.
Sounds good. Our second to last topic, I forget if we mentioned it in a previous episode, but Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, had done this interview with 60 Minutes on CBS. They had recorded it, they hadn't aired it yet. Well, it ended up airing this last Sunday at 7 p.m. And admittedly, when I was making notes for this episode, I thought about calling it a crypto hit piece. Um, it didn't seem terribly crypto positive as much as Brad tried to be positive about crypto, because he is. They recorded him for a long period of time. The whole thing got edited down to a total of 7 to 8 minutes. And the CBS didn't appear to be interested in doing fact checking because they had John Reed Shark, excuse me, Stark, not Shark, that used to be at the SEC on. He basically was using Gensler's talking points about how it's clear, there's non-compliance, blah, blah, blah. And it's tiring. I feel like we were past this, and here we go. But if you can watch it online, if you're curious, you can go to CBS and look for the crypto piece. They tried to explain it. At the end of the day, I think this is basically a non-event, because the people that are watching CBS 60 Minutes are probably the older crowd. They're likely to buy an ETF anyways. They're not going to Coinbase to buy stuff. And then the younger crowd's not watching CBS, so they weren't influenced. So we talk about it, but again, we could have left it off and it probably wouldn't matter.
It was a letdown to me. Yeah, it was a letdown to me. Like, I think I shared this with you. I mean, I'm 46, and I grew up. 60 Minutes was the you watch CBS Sunday afternoon football, and it was always a couple big juicy stories advertised in that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock game that you wanted to watch, right? And I just I think it's just somewhat, the show is a little bit of a casualty of the times we're in. They try to come up with a really interesting and juicy topic, and then they just didn't. To me, they just didn't do a really good job of doing that investigative journalism that I used to think about. It was so one-sided. They could have gotten 6 or 7 more interesting people to weigh in. They could have, they said 90-minute special edition. And I'm thinking, okay, we're going to get a commercial to do that. I mean, it was a letdown.
Yeah. I feel like I understand crypto. I remember watching it. Then after it was over, I was like, so what was the point of this? It didn't feel terribly educational. And I'm even now, I can't quite explain what the whole point of the 7 minutes was. So anyways, we won't waste any more of our airtime, and we'll move on with this one. So the last one, so I guess it's a bit of an apology to start with this last one. Last week, we said it had been approved and it was launching soon. Well, guess what? We're going to say the same thing this week. It wasn't, but we're going to say at the same time, it wasn't approved last week. We found out after the fact. It was approved yesterday on the 10th, and should be launching in the next couple of days. There's already some exchanges talking about enabling it. So it feels, I would imagine, maybe by the end of the week, we get this stablecoin launched. And it will be interesting to see how fast it grows. Because there's plenty, especially of people from the Bitcoin community, that just do not like Ripple. They do not like XRP.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fascinating to kind of see how they feel about it when there's all of a sudden a Ripple stablecoin and XRP in the top 10, because that to me seems like it will happen relatively quickly. And just kind of see how they deal with that moment.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of it, and that it's coming, and it's obviously in New York. You put all this together again. I think you circle back to some of the things we talked about at the very beginning. A lot of momentum is what I see. A lot of momentum. We talked about the market feels a little bit FOMO driven right now, a little less commercial utility driven. But yeah, the next 12, 24, 36 months for crypto, given all the things that are happening in terms of regulation and results of the elections, etc. It does, it does make for an environment where investors and people that are interested in what's going on in the space have to really pay attention. So I'm glad we're doing these. And I'm looking forward to. I'm sure you are too, Robert, of being able to break down some of the things that we see for the next few months and years, because there's not a lot of places. You go to crypto, get news. There's not a lot of places to really get that breakdown. So correct. I've come to realize there's a lot of opportunity that we sit on here to sort of share insight.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of the Weekly Crypto Check-In. If you want to stay updated on future episodes, you can find us in any podcast player by searching Teton Crypto Capital or the Weekly Crypto Check-In. Take care.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, trading, or any other advice. The content provided is general in nature and not tailored to any individual's specific circumstances. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult with a professional financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Cryptocurrency trading involves significant risks, including, but not limited to, the potential for loss of all or a portion of your investment, market volatility, and regulatory uncertainty. The hosts, guests, and producers of this podcast are not responsible for any decisions or actions taken based on the information discussed herein. Cryptocurrency is not legal tender in many jurisdictions and is subject to market risks. Past performance does not guarantee future results. This podcast does not endorse or guarantee any investment outcomes or results. Use of this podcast implies your acceptance of this disclaimer.